I don't care if your inbred family has been squatting here since the Stone Age. This is my lake now, and you're trespassing on HOA property. That's what Vivian Blackthorne screamed at me while standing on my great-grandfather's hand-built dock, her designer heels grinding into wood older than her entire bloodline. The smell of her overpriced perfume clashed with the pine needles, like everything else about this woman clashed with decency. She gestured at 32 identical rental cabins, now covering my family's island like a suburban rash. Demolish that shack and pay 85 grand, or I'll bulldoze it myself. 3 years later, I stood in that same spot, watching her pack the last of her belongings. Turns out every single one of those cabins was built on my property. The courts agreed. And when the judge handed me the keys to her lakefront mansion, the one that was also on my land, well, let's just say karma has a sense of humor. What would you do if your HOA tried to steal your family's generational land? Where are you watching from? And what's your worst HOA nightmare? My name's Ezra Thornfield, and that island has been in my family since 1896. My great-grandfather, Silas, bought 47 acres of pristine lake, Clearwater Wilderness for $200. About what Vivian probably spends on a single manicure these days. 4 generations of Thornfields built their lives on that land. Hand-hewn log cabins, off-grid solar that actually works, a rainwater collection system that would make a prepper weep with joy. We never developed it, never commercialized it, just lived there, fished there, found peace there. I'm 52, retired marine engineer. Spent 20 years building bridges in places where people shoot at you for fun. Came home 2 years ago after my wife, Sarah, died. Cancer, the kind that takes everything good and leaves you hollow. The island was supposed to be our healing place, where we'd build a retreat center for veterans dealing with PTSD. Sarah had drawn up the plans herself, sketching therapy gardens where the old fishing trails wound through the pines. Instead, I found myself dealing with Vivian Blackthorne. Picture a real estate agent who sold her soul for a Tesla and a lakefront mansion. 48 years old, divorced from the county zoning director, a connection that gave her more pull at City Hall than a John boat motor. She runs the Clearwater Luxury Communities HOA like her personal kingdom, complete with a 47-page rulebook that makes the IRS tax code look like a children's book. The day she first showed up, I was replacing dock planks. Meditative work that keeps your hands busy while your mind processes grief. That's when I heard it, the angry whine of an overpowered speedboat cutting through the morning calm like a chainsaw through a symphony. Vivian stepped onto my dock wearing a white pantsuit that probably cost more than my truck, carrying a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets. Her perfume hit me before she did. Something expensive and aggressive that made the wood smoke from my morning fire smell apologetic. Are you Ezra Thornfield? She didn't wait for an answer. I'm Vivian Blackthorne, president of Clearwater Luxury Communities, HOA. We need to discuss your compliance violations. I set down my hammer, wiped my calloused hands on my jeans. The contrast between her manicured nails and my work-worn fingers told the whole story right there. I'm sorry, what violations? I asked. She consulted her clipboard like it contained the nuclear codes. Your property falls under our expanded community boundaries as of last year. This structure, she waved dismissively at the cabin my great-grandfather built, violates approximately 37 architectural standards. Now, I remembered reading somewhere during my military legal training that HOAs love to claim expanded jurisdiction, but they need proper legal channels and member votes to do it. Something told me I should probably check if Vivian's boundary expansion was actually filed with the county. Most people assume it was done legally, but you'd be surprised how often it wasn't. Ma'am, with all due respect, this island predates your HOA by over a century. Property law doesn't care about your feelings, Mr. Thornfield. Her smile was sharp enough to gut fish. You have 30 days to bring this property into compliance or face foreclosure proceedings. The total assessment, including retroactive fees is $85,000. The locals at Murphy's Marina had warned me about Vivian. She's got more complaints filed against her than the health department has roaches, old Dolores had said while selling me boat fuel. She goes after anyone who doesn't fit her country club vision of lakefront living. Vivian handed me papers thick enough to build a small cabin, turned on her designer heel, and clicked back to her boat. As she roared away, leaving a wake that rocked my kayak against the dock, I caught diesel exhaust mixing with her perfume, a combination that perfectly captured everything wrong with this situation. That night, sitting by the fire Sarah and I had built together, I read every page. Vivian wanted me to remove my solar panels, demolish my composting toilet, pave my garden, and paint everything beige. Basically, turn my family's sanctuary into a suburban nightmare. I looked out at the water, at the oak where my great-grandfather had carved his initials, and made a decision. If Vivian Blackthorn wanted a fight, she'd get one. She just had no idea what she was up against. Week 2 brought a certified letter thick enough to stop a bullet. Blackthorn and Associates law firm. Apparently, Vivian had promoted herself from real estate agent to legal eagle. The letterhead was fancier than a wedding invitation, complete with gold embossing that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. Her latest masterpiece? My island access road crossed HOA property. Technically true. There's a 50-foot easement connecting the mainland to my dock. But now she wanted $1,200 monthly for road maintenance fees. Retroactive 5 years. $72,000 for a gravel path that hadn't seen maintenance since the Bush administration, the first one. The smell of fresh asphalt and bureaucracy filled the air as I drove to the county courthouse. I spent 3 hours in the basement records room, surrounded by files that looked like they'd been there since Moses was in diapers, hunting through property deeds written when people still used fountain pens. That's where I struck gold. The original 1896 deed, with my great-grandfather's signature, contained 5 beautiful words: perpetual right of way granted. Back in my core legal training, I'd learned about prescriptive easements. Use a road for 99 years continuously, and the law says it's yours, whether the neighbors throw a tantrum or not. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. I filed my counterclaim that afternoon. Betty, the courthouse clerk who'd probably been there since the foundation was poured, stamped my paperwork with obvious satisfaction. That Blackthorn woman's got more complaints against her than a telemarketer, she whispered conspiratorially. Vivian's response came faster than a NASCAR pit stop. By Thursday morning, my access road looked like a crime scene. Bright yellow, no trespassing signs sprouted like weeds, complete with threats of prosecution that would have made a drug dealer nervous. She'd hired private security. One kid named Jerry, who looked about 19 and clearly regretted every life choice that led him to this moment. "Sorry about this, sir," Jerry mumbled as my truck approached. His radio crackled with what sounded suspiciously like someone ordering a Big Mac. "Ma'am says I gotta check all vehicles for authorization." Through my windshield, I spotted Vivian on her mansion's deck, watching through binoculars like some kind of suburban spy. The woman had turned property harassment into Olympic sport. "Jerry, you know this road's been in my family longer than that house has existed, right?" The kid shifted like he needed a bathroom break, clearly wishing he'd taken that job at the pizza place instead. "Yes, sir, but orders are orders." I handed him a copy of my prescriptive easement filing. "Give this to your boss. Tell her I'll be using my family's road, whether she likes it or not." As I drove past, gravel crunching under my tires like Vivian's dreams of easy money, Jerry stood there reading legal documents with the expression of someone trying to understand quantum physics. Poor kid probably thought security work meant checking parking meters, not refereeing century-old land disputes. The community reaction that evening was pure gold. At Murphy's Marina, Dolores rolled her eyes so hard I worried she'd sprain something. Vivian cited the Johnsons last month for having a fire pit on their own property. said it was a visual disruption to lakefront aesthetics. Hardware store clerk Dan quietly slipped me legal forms with my screw purchase. On the house, he winked. We're all rooting for you. By Sunday, 3 neighbors had shared their Vivian war stories. Wind chimes as auditory pollution, fishing boats being aesthetically incompatible. The woman had more complaints than a restaurant health inspector. The battle lines were drawn, and David was about to show Goliath that sometimes the slingshot wins. Month 2 hit like a freight train loaded with concrete mixers and bad decisions. I woke up at dawn to the sound of diesel engines and what can only be described as the mechanical equivalent of a migraine. Outside my cabin window, Lake Clearwater looked like a construction zone had exploded. Barges loaded with lumber, cement trucks on floating platforms, and enough yellow hard hats to outfit a small army. Vivian had gone nuclear. Clearwater Island Resort Development. 32 identical rental cabins sprouting across my family's land like some suburban infection. The smell of sawdust and diesel exhaust replaced my morning coffee aroma. And the sound of hammering started at 6 a.m. sharp because apparently even construction crews follow HOA noise ordinances. The woman had balls. I'll give her that. She'd broken ground without permits I could find, claiming the island qualified as multifamily recreational zoning, which was news to me considering it had been residential wilderness since my great-grandfather cleared the first trees. I spent that morning at the county zoning office, a building that looked like it was designed by someone who'd given up on life. The receptionist, a tired-looking woman named Gladys, barely looked up when I explained the situation. "You'll want Director Matthews," she sighed, like she'd had this conversation before. Director Matthews turned out to be Richard Matthews, Vivian's ex-husband. Small world, smaller ethics. The man had a mustache that screamed, "I peaked in 1987," and the handshake of a wet fish. "Mr. Thornfield, right?" He leaned back like he owned the place, which technically he did. "I understand you have concerns about the island development. They're building on my property without permits." Matthews consulted his computer with the enthusiasm of someone checking yesterday's weather. "Actually, I fast-tracked an emergency development permit yesterday. Island qualifies as commercial recreation zone under new county guidelines." Right? Guidelines written by his ex-wife's legal team. No doubt. Here's where my military training kicked in. Back in the Corps, we learned that when local authority is compromised, you go up the chain of command. Environmental violations fall under federal jurisdiction, which means the EPA doesn't care about local politics or who's sleeping with whom. That afternoon, I called the State Environmental Protection Agency. The investigator, Sandra Chun, was very interested in my photos of disturbed eagle nesting sites and direct lake dumping. "We'll be out there Monday," she promised. "Keep documenting." Monday couldn't come fast enough. By Friday, Vivian was celebrating her construction milestone with champagne on the barge. The pop of the cork echoed across water like a gunshot. Her laugh carried on the wind with all the warmth of a dental drill. Her Instagram post that night made my teeth ache. Dreams don't work unless you do. Hashtag Boss Lady Lake Living. The photo showed her in a pristine hard hat posing next to lumber while construction workers tried to pretend she wasn't there. Then came the accident. During routine crane operations, 3 of my solar panels somehow got cracked, conveniently facing away from the construction cameras. Of course, the crew foreman, a mountain called Big Mike, looked genuinely apologetic when he knocked on my door. "Real sorry about that, Mr. Thornfield." His handshake was honest, unlike his employer. "Accident happens, you know?" Something in his tone suggested Big Mike wasn't exactly thrilled with his current boss either. But here's what Vivian didn't know. I'd been documenting everything with the methodical precision that 20 years of military engineering beats into you. Photos with GPS coordinates, timestamps, detailed violation logs, every illegal dump, every disturbed habitat, every accident that happened to damage my property. The EPA investigation would find enough violations to shut down the entire project. Portable toilets dumping directly into the lake, construction debris floating like confetti, and one very illegal disturbance of a federally protected eagle nesting site. As I watched another barge load of materials arrive, I almost felt sorry for Vivian. She was spending a fortune building on land she didn't own, violating federal environmental laws in the process. But that sympathy lasted about as long as the sound of her next champagne cork popping. Let her build. Every nail hammered was another dollar I'd eventually collect.